What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here, and we're back with another Star Wars Unlimited preview card review. This is the more detailed one. I've already reviewed several of these cards in YouTube shorts, but those are just quick impressions, and we're going to go into a bit more detail here. It's a little funny because only a few days ago I released the early January Star Wars Unlimited TCG spoiler review, but FFG has seemingly increased the pace of the spoilers, at least from earlier this month. So we already have another 8 cards to review. Let's get into it. So we're going to start off here with the Occupier Siege Tank. This is a 5 cost 5/4. It is an Imperial vehicle tank, and it has grit. This unit gets +1/+0 for each damage on it. So Occupier Siege Tank, and sorry guys, I'm gonna zoom this in a bit. I think we should have a bigger card image here for you. There we go. Occupier Siege Tank. So this is a unfortunately not a very strong unit. So just thinking about stats at 5 cost 5/4, it's really kind of disappointing. You can get 9 points of stats, which this has at 4 cost. You can actually get more than that on some units that are a little above the curve. But in general, I think of 9 points of stats as being uh, on curve for a 4 cost unit. Now, this unit does have its stats weighted towards power, which is arguably better than being weighted towards HP here. So being a 5/4, there's probably something to that. Like I would probably rather have a 5/4 than like Jabba the Hutt. So Jabba is a 4 cost, and he is a 2/8. So he actually has 10 points of stats. But these 9 points of stats are, in my opinion, a better distribution. However, Jabba also has some abilities that are really good. And the Occupier Siege Tank has Grit, which is kind of a good ability, but ironically, it's an ability that rewards having more HP. So its stat distribution favors power, but it has an ability that favors HP. So there's kind of some anti-synergy between these stats and this ability. Um, that's not to say this card is useless. Like it does have the Imperial trait, which really helps. This card will work well with maximum firepower, for instance, because this is a 5 power unit that that is an Imperial. So max firepower, you can take that 5 power and deal damage there. So let's just take a quick look at maximum firepower. A friendly Imperial unit deals damage equal to its power to a unit, then another friendly Imperial unit deals damage equal to its power to the same unit. So pretty good synergy there. Another thing that you could do with it is if you bring out a Snow Trooper Lieutenant, when played, you may attack with the unit. If it's an Imperial unit, it gets +2 power for this attack. So if you play this thing and then buff its attack with a Snow Trooper Lieutenant, you deal 7 damage because it is 5 strength. 7 is actually an important breakpoint because it defeats a lot of leaders in one hit. So I think that's actually a pretty reasonable, I think that's actually a pretty reasonable synergy. So, you know, there are some synergies to it, but ultimately I think that 5 cost for these stats and for something that doesn't make any impact on the board when you first play it is it's really rather disappointing in my view. Um, are you going to play this in draft? Yeah, probably sometimes, but it's hard to look at this 5 cost for 5/4 with grit, and then you compare to like Wampa, which is 4 for 4/5 with overwhelm, and this Wampa is just looking like a way better deal. And now, to be fair, the Wampa doesn't have the Imperial or vehicle traits, which can be relevant, but it also costs 1 less, and costing 1 less means a lot. Similarly, you can look at Kanan Jarrus, who is 4 cost 4/5 with a strong ability that does some healing, and he has really good traits. Force and Rebel and Spectre are all traits that have a lot of relevance. So Spectre only relevant for Hera, but Force and Rebel have a lot of synergies. And so again, same number of points of stats, better traits, probably a better ability, and he costs 1 less. So ultimately, I think this is a card that you might be running in a limited format. It's not so bad that you'll never ever ever play it, but it is a little disappointing relative to where some other units are at, even 1 cost below it. And then at the same cost, you can look at like Zeb. So Zeb is 5 for a 5/5, so he has better stats. And he has a really, really, really good ability instead of a like medium ability. I will say the occupier siege tank, if you ambush it in with the energy conversion lab, you can pick off one unit, take some damage, and then enable your grit. But there are also other cards in this game, like Syndicate Lackeys, 5 cost, 5/4, that just have ambush innately. And so something like this also seems just a lot better than the something like this also just seems a lot better than the Occupier Siege Tank. So unfortunately, this is I think a weaker card. Might see some play in draft, especially if you have drafted Imperial synergies, but overall not one that I'm very excited about, and probably not one that will see a lot of constructed play. Um, could be wrong. There's going to be tank synergy. We haven't seen a ton of tank cards right now, but maybe there are going to be some future things that work well with tanks, and that are going to take this card, kind of take this card to the next level. But you know, at least for now, I don't think it looks great. Let's move to the next card. So now we're going to have Karabast. This is a 2 cost event. It has the Spectre trait, so you can play this in Hera, out of aspect, no penalty. It is an aggression and heroism card. A friendly unit deals damage to an enemy unit equal to the amount of damage on the friendly unit plus 1. So this is a pretty good card in my opinion, but I know a lot of people have been kind of negative about it. Um, I don't entirely see why, quite frankly. I think this is a very solid card. So so basically the way this works is if you don't have a unit on the board, you can't play this, or it doesn't do anything. If you have a unit that isn't damaged, you can play this and it does 1 damage minimum. But if you have units that are damaged, it scales up. So this can be a very interesting sort of card. You can potentially hit people really hard with it. And like let's say that you have, Chewbacca. Chewbacca has 9 HP. So if you have Chewbacca, you deploy him, he's on 9 HP, he's a sentinel, the opponent's attacking into him. Chewie takes a bunch of damage. Let's say he has 7 or 8 damage. Now you play Karabast, that's going to do 8 or 9 damage. That could take out Darth Vader in one shot. That could, destroy a capital ship. So in the right circumstance, this hits incredibly hard, especially for its cost. But the downside is you do need to have damage on a unit. And additionally, the aspects here, because it is a heroism card, it doesn't necessarily synergize with Krennic, a leader that likes to have damage on units, or with cards like the Imperial, the Death Trooper here, where it deals damage to itself when you play it. So there are a few synergies that would be more available if this card were in villainy rather than heroism. But at the same time, I think this is a solid card. You have to remember that in this game, removal is a lot more expensive than in some comparable games. So, when we're looking at like a baseline good removal card is Open Fire, 3 cost, deal 4 damage to a unit. This card is versatile and effective, but this isn't a great rate compared to what you get in other games. It does cost 3, and Karabast costs 2, will sometimes be hitting significantly harder, and against small units, maybe it won't hit that hard, but it doesn't matter. So like if you wanted to remove Greedo or something, playing Open Fire and Greedo feels kind of bad. Playing Karabast, you can just ping him off. If you're playing it just to remove a shield, Karabast is cheaper. Overall, I think this is actually a quite solid card. I think it will see play both in constructed and in limited formats, and it does have kind of some situational elements to it that make it maybe less appealing for some, but I also think that can be mitigated, especially if you are playing, let's say that you're playing Jin Urso, if you can attack with a unit and debuff the defender's power. If you're playing something like that, some sort of situation where you're more likely to see unit conflicts and trying to have your unit take out their unit and do those sorts of plays, I think that this is going to end up actually looking. I think this is going to end up actually looking pretty good. Okay, so that's Karabast. Next, we're going to talk about the Alliance Dispatcher. 1 cost, 1/2 action. Play a unit from your hand. It costs 1 less. This is command heroism. It does have the rebel trait. So this is the so-called Llanowar Elves card of Star Wars Unlimited. I had speculated that there was going to be a card of this type based on their comments during the command aspect preview stream a long time ago, where I think they had said that there was not going to be any more direct ramp, but there was going to be maybe a ramp-like effect. So the idea of a unit that could discount or could count as a resource or whatever it was seemed interesting. I have to say this card ended up at a lower power level than I was expecting for this, but it is not at an unplayable power level. And I know again, some people were really negative on this card, but I think there are some very relevant things this card can do. So for one thing, so like first off, yes, one cost 1/2. Those are really bad stats. You're not playing this for the stats. You're playing this for the ability. It's not being played. If you want to have a unit that just fights, you could play R2D2. One cost 1/4. It has a somewhat useful ability. But if you wanted to be playing a one cost that was going to be, you're going to play upgrades on it and you're going to try to get mixed up in fights, R2D2 is way better. However, the Alliance Dispatcher. So let's talk about like two reasons why I think this card could be good. So people have said, well, they just kill it with their early game drop, so it doesn't do anything. Well, okay, so think about this. First up, let's talk. If you're going first, turn one, you play the Alliance Dispatcher. That's your first action. Then, they play some unit that can kill the Alliance Dispatcher. Sure, let's say that they have it. They play some ground. Their first play is on the ground, and they can kill your Alliance Dispatcher. Okay, but you went first. So now on turn two, you get to use this as your first action to play a four-cost unit before they can do anything. So, and there are some good four-cost units, especially for rebels. I think that, or for heroism rather. So, let's say you're playing green-red. First action, you play Alliance Dispatcher. Second action, second action, you play K2SO. Now you have a really strong unit for the second round. Or let's say, next you're gonna play Kanan, four cost 4/5. Let's say next you're going to play Dodana. Four cost 4/4. Other friendly rebel units get +1/+1. Now that dispatcher is a 2/3. Maybe the unit they thought they were going to remove the dispatcher with can no longer do it. You have some real options there that even if your opponent has a ground unit that can counter you, they might not actually get a chance to do that before you get this effect. Yeah, maybe they use energy conversion lab and ambush you on the first turn or whatever. Sure, okay, that can happen. But like, if that happened, you made them use, you just made them use the energy conversion lab, and energy conversion lab is really good. I know Bobby Sapphire was saying a similar thing on the Saga podcast earlier, and I think, I think that was apt. I think this guy is better than people think. The other thing, Luke Skywalker. So if your leader is Luke Skywalker, faithful friend. Luke Skywalker, faithful friend, action, one resource, exhaust, give a shield token to a heroism unit you play this phase. So now what we're looking at is first first action, Alliance Dispatcher on the first turn. Let's say you're going second, they play some ground unit, you play your Alliance Dispatcher. Yes, their unit can defeat the Alliance Dispatcher, but you use Luke's ability and give them a shield. And now, okay, probably their unit can't. There are a few units that could still beat you through the shield, if they had Sabine Explosives Artist or if they had a Saboteur or whatever. But most early drops won't be able to deal with that, and you'll get a chance to use the Dispatcher on the next turn, even though you went second. So I think this card is better than people think. I think it merits testing in Green Luke. I think it might even merit testing in some other builds where having this unit, especially as a first turn play, might be a big problem for the opponent, or if they go to space on the first turn, it's just quite relevant, I think. Anyway, I think this guy is he's lower powered than what an effect like this could have been. And I do think his raw power level is lower than like Super Laser Technician here, who's sort of the villainy ramp card. So Super Laser Technician's a really, really good card. When defeated, you may put this unit into play as a resource and ready it. This is a great ramp card. It's very, very strong. I do think the Alliance Dispatcher came in a little weaker than that. Alliance Dispatcher also costs one instead of three, I'm not giving up on Alliance Dispatcher. I think there's still relevance for it, especially in Green Luke. We'll have to see how it goes, but I think this could be quite a strong card. Also, the fact that your opponent might be attacking into it, they really want to deal with it. that could end up representing reduced damage that you take on your base or on your other units. So that is in itself a bit of value. Okay, so that was the Alliance Dispatcher. Let's move on to the Regional Sympathizers. This is a card that people were negative about, and I think they were justifiably negative about it because I think this card is really bad. 4 cost heroism, 3/4 rebel. It has restore 2. So the problem with this is these stats are not competitive at 4 cost. So 3/4 is on curve for a 3 cost. Restore 2 is an okay ability. It is not such an amazing ability that it makes this card suddenly worth it. Um, I just want to show 2 quick comparisons here. So regional sympathizers, 4 cost, 3/4, restore 2. Let's look at Yoda, 3 cost, 2/4, restore 2. So he costs 1 less, he has 1 less power. He has the force trait, which is, as Tyler said, the best trait in the game. He has when defeated, choose any number of players that each draw a card. So he has an extra ability which is really good. He costs 1 less and he's a force unit. And then at 4 cost, let's look at Kanan. So Kanan, 4 cost, 4/5, also a force unit, so has that extra trait synergy. And on attack, you may discard 1 card from the defending player's deck for each friendly Spectre unit, heal 1 damage from your base for each different aspect among the discarded cards. So this is basically restore. It's usually going to be restore 1 or 2. If you have multiple Spectres, it can sometimes end up hitting for 3. And in rare situations where someone has out of aspect cards, it could be more than that. But in general, I consider this to be like, restore 1.5 or something like that in most situations, because it will always restore at least 1, but it's not really. I guess technically, you could hit an aspectless card and not heal, but I think in practice it's usually going to restore 1 or 2. And so same cost, +1/+1, very similar ability, better traits. And so the regional sympathizers, one advantage is that it's heroism aspect only. So you can put it into decks that might not otherwise have ways to restore, but it's just so inefficient for its cost that I don't think you're going to really be loving that prospect. I think it's just, if you wanted to import restore into another deck, I don't know. I don't think this is the way to do it. I might even play like restore cards from out of aspect vigilance or whatever, rather than doing this. I'm not sure. Um, so yeah, unfortunate. Are you going to play it in some limited decks? Yeah, probably, but I don't think you're going to be really happy about it. I think this is below curve stats and a decent ability, but one that you can get elsewhere in a better version. So yeah, if restore ends up being super important and you have a deck that doesn't have blue or green and that really really wants to have restore, maybe you end up playing this, but I would be very surprised even as a sideboard card if this saw a bunch of play. Okay, so that's the regional sympathizers. We're gonna do Chirrut. We're gonna do the evaluation of Chirrut here last. Let's talk about confiscate. 1 cost event, defeat and upgrade. This is a neutral or generic or whatever it's called in this game event. It has no aspect icons at all. Any deck can play this for 1. This card is honestly quite good. So I think that this is actually a very relevant card in the meta because I think many decks are going to want to sideboard this in order to counter really strong upgrades like the Jedi Lightsaber. So Jedi Lightsaber, 3 cost upgrade, attached to a non-vehicle unit. If attached unit is a force unit, it gains on attack, give the defender -2/-2 for this phase. So Jedi Lightsaber on Yoda or Kanan or something like that can be incredibly strong and create a huge problem in the early game. Some decks can't really deal with that. And so cards like this would be good sideboard choices. Another one, maybe an even better option, is Traitorous. So 5 cost upgrade that steals a unit from your opponent, but when this upgrade becomes unattached from a unit, that unit's owner takes control of it. So if someone plays their 5 cost Traitorous, steals your 3 cost unit, maybe an upgraded 3 cost unit, and you play Confiscate and remove their Traitorous, get your unit back. Great counter. Actually a huge blowout play if they spend 5 resources for something that you counter with 1 resource. And I think this is going to be in a lot of sideboards as well. Also, it's worth noting that experience tokens and shield tokens are upgrades. So you can use this to defeat a shield for 1 cost. Now, are you going to want to put this in the main deck? I don't think you'll necessarily want to do that unless it's a situation where upgrades have become incredibly prevalent in the meta, but I think a lot of decks will want to run this as a sideboard card. That being said, we can look at some other cards. So disabling, like if you have aggression as an aspect, disabling Fang Fighter, I think is a better version because yes, it costs 3, but you get a 3/2 body in the Space Arena, which is honestly pretty solid, and you defeat an upgrade when played. This also means this card has kind of a side benefit where even if the opponent isn't playing upgrades, sometimes it can be worth it to play this just to get more aggression out there. I think that if you have access to aggression, you're probably going to want to run cards like this instead of confiscate. But cards that don't have decks that don't have access to aggression might well want to be playing this in the side. Also, I will say Cunning has a few other tricks. So one example would be Waylay, return a non-leader unit to its owner's hand. Cantina Bouncer does a similar effect. If you have cards like that, then the need for this is reduced because waylaying a unit is going to cause any upgrades on them to be defeated. So, if you're cunning, you might not see this as important. If you're aggression, you probably have better options. But if you do not have either of those aspects, I think that this ends up being a very relevant sideboard card. And we have seen builds like, blue green, for instance, has been actually quite popular. And I think that having this in the sideboard for those blue green decks is going to be a pretty good call, quite frankly. Okay, next up, we have Don't Get Cocky. This is a 4-cost event in the Cunning aspect. Choose a unit, one at a time, reveal cards from your deck until you choose to stop or have revealed 7 cards. If the combined cost of the revealed cards is 7 or less, deal that much damage to the chosen unit. Put the revealed cards on the bottom of your deck in a random order. Okay, so before we get into the actual effect, I want to say this card has great art. This Luke Skywalker here, I think this is a really good, I think this is a really good rendition here. Very cool thing of a moment from Star Wars: A New Hope, um, and fitting with the name of the card as well. That's what Han says to Luke after Luke shoots down one of the TIEs that's attacking the Falcon. Anyway, let's get to what the card actually does. So um, this is basically, so first off, this is the only true removal, not disruption, but actual removal card that we've seen in Cunning. So Cunning has a lot of like exhaust, bounce, stuff like that that is going to disrupt your opponent, but not actually get rid of their card in the long term. Don't Get Cocky is an exception. This card will actually just deal damage. Now, it doesn't do it very reliably though, so it's expensive, and it has this like push your luck mechanic where you're revealing cards from the top of the deck until you either choose to stop or have revealed 7 cards. And if you reveal more than 7 total cost of cards from the top of your deck, this ends up not actually doing the damage. So there's like a blackjack element where you want to get close, but you don't want to go over. If you go over, you're in trouble. But if you just get close, you can do some major damage. I think this is going to be stronger in decks that have a low cost curve with lots of cheaper units, or cheaper effects in general, because in those decks you have less chance of immediately going bust. So like, an extreme example is that if you have like home one, this unit costs 8. If you flip this at all, if you flip this as your first card, this immediately doesn't do the damage, which is a giant negative situation for something you paid 4 for. Um, let's say that you have, like Emperor Palpatine, same sort of thing. So Palpatine is an 8-cost unit. So, 8 costs, it's going to just cause this to stop working immediately. Um, However, I have some decks, so like I have a Cunning Sabine deck where the most expensive thing in the deck costs 4. I have a Leia aggression deck where I think the most expensive card in the main deck costs 4. Um, in those sorts of decks, I think this could be really good because you have much more ability to know that you can push the limit a bit without being likely to go over or with it actually being impossible to go over. So, if I'm playing my Sabine deck and I had this card in there and the first card that I flip is a 3 cost, I know that I can flip another card. And because the most expensive thing I could flip is a 4 cost, which would take me to that exact 7 and let me hit them really hard. I do think this card is a little bit expensive for what you get, but I haven't played with it yet. This is that sort of theory crafting. I do think it's a bit expensive, but removal in this game does tend to be expensive. Ultimately, I think that it may well see play, especially in cunning decks that are looking for some more actual removal and not just disruption effects, um, and who have a cheaper cost curve. On a more expensive cost curve, this really becomes a lot riskier. So, we'll have to see where it ends up. I think that ultimately, I think it's an interesting card. It has a very fun push your luck mechanic that I think is very fitting for the cunning aspect and that sort of gambling and risk taking. Um, I do think it could maybe cost a bit less, but I don't think it's unplayable. I think we may well see this around. Okay, so then let's move on from Don't Get Cocky to the Reinforcement Walker, 8 cost unit. It's a ground unit, is a vehicle walker, 6 power, 9 HP. When played or on attack, look at the top card of your deck. Either draw that card or discard it and heal 3 damage from your base. So this is honestly a really good ability. So at 8 cost, 8 cost units have to do something really strong. And the question is this strong enough? And I think the answer is quite possibly. What you're looking at when you use the reinforcement walker is this is a unit that is going to immediately either heal or draw a card. And then if my opponent doesn't deal with it, it can do the same thing every turn. Every time I attack with it, I get that same effect again. So that can really add up to a lot of healing. It can also be a lot of card draw. So, you could think of this card as having Restore 3, which is, very solid. And additionally, it has that flexibility where instead you can be using it to draw more cards and use that to pressure your opponent. Um, so I think this is actually a pretty solid. This is a pretty solid late game unit. It has that stabilization or the card draw to get you out of a potential late game sort of top deck mode and seeing more of your deck. Um, One downside to this card is that in limited formats where you have fewer cards in your deck, this accelerates you closer to fatiguing out. That may or may not be relevant, but I have had a few draft games where it has gone to fatigue or to near fatigue, and either effect of this card is going to get you closer to fatiguing. So if you discard a card and heal 3, that is going to reduce the number of cards in your deck, and if you draw more cards, that also reduces the number of cards in your deck. So that is a potential downside for it, at least in limited play where fatigue is more of a thing. However, I do think this is overall a pretty solid card. If you have, and let's show a little synergy here. If you have Admiral Piet, each friendly non-leader unit that costs 6 or more gains ambush. After you play that unit, it may ready and attack an enemy unit. You can play the Reinforcement Walker, trigger its ability when played, then ambush something with it, and trigger its ability again on attack. So you can potentially get this going twice in a turn. Could be really strong. One other note is that this does not have the Imperial trait, despite being an Imperial Walker in the art. So that is something to look out for a Tarkin deck or with maximum firepower or whatever. Don't get tripped up by that. I think there are a few cards that have like clearly rebel themed art or clearly imperial themed art, but don't have the rebel or imperial traits. Uh, I think that I believe that Tyler, one of the designers or developers for this game with FFG, has mentioned that that was something they were doing early on, where the art was like, this is one potential example of this type of thing. Um, Rather than the art being like this is the like specific unit or vehicle or whatever that the card represents. However, I believe he also wrote or implied that they were moving away from that in the future, and that and that maybe some of those would have had the rebel or imperial traits with their current design perspective. So that something to consider for the first set. Does limit the synergies a bit, but overall still interesting. Okay, and then last and not least, we're gonna look at Chirrut. I don't know how to pronounce this. Chirrut Imwe? Don't know. This is, of course, Donnie Yen's character from Star Wars Rogue One. Probably Star Wars Rogue One is, in my opinion, the best of the post Disney like modern Star Wars movies or whatever you want to call it. I think it's honestly in my top 3 favorite Star Wars movies. And I think Donnie Yen did a great job as Chirrut in that film. I thought he was cool. I thought he was funny. Just overall really memorable character, and his abilities in the game are quite characterful as well. So on his leader side, as an action, he can give a unit +2 HP for the phase. So basically allowing a defender to hold out longer goes especially well with like a sentinel unit, for instance, where that temporary HP might mean that they stay on the field and keep blocking attacks after the opponent hits them the first time. Can also work well with a unit like General Dodonna, where he's buffing your other units, and the opponent might want to deal with him, but by giving that defense increase, you can make it so that it's harder. Because this does go away at the end of the phase, if the unit has taken lethal damage, it will be defeated later, but perhaps the extended time on the field is going to buy them a key opportunity. Additionally, you could potentially heal them or buff their defense in the intermediary period. So let's say I have an Echo-based defender. So Echo-based defender, 3 cost 4/3 with Sentinel. So let's say I have this out and my opponent has a unit that swings for 3. I use Chirrut's ability to give the Echo-based defender +2 HP. The opponent swings into it anyway and figures, okay, the Echo-based defender will die at the end of the phase. Now with 3 damage on it, I play, the humble repair and I remove that damage. And now when the temporary HP is removed, my unit is still there. Or, maybe I give the Echo-based defender that Jedi lightsaber that we were discussing earlier, and that increases her HP. And now when the temporary HP is no longer the only thing keeping her alive, and she once again stays on the field despite otherwise being removed. So, that kind of gives you some little extra opportunities for your units to stay alive. I don't think it's the most powerful leader ability, but I do think it will have some use, especially with Sentinels. But sure, it does deploy on 5 resources, which is the quickest deploying force unit in the game. So Luke and Grand Inquisitor deploy at 6, or I'm sorry, the quickest deploying force leader in the game. So there are cheaper force units like Yoda, Fifth Brother, Kanan, but in terms of leaders who have the force trait, Chirrut is the quickest because Grand Inquisitor deploys at 6 or more resources, Luke deploys at 6 or more resources, Vader actually deploys at 7 or more resources. So 5 is going to be notably faster, and that's going to be relevant with Force Synergy cards. So you have cards like Force Throw. 1 cost, choose a player, that player discards a card from their hand, then if you control a force unit, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the cost of the discarded card. So you can enable those quickly with your leader. Then when you deploy Chirrut, he has a really weird ability. He has a 3/5, which are bad stats for this, so for deploying at this phase, but during the action phase, this unit isn't defeated by having no remaining HP. During the regroup phase, if he has no remaining HP, defeat him. So this means that a lot of the things that someone might do to take out a leader quickly just don't work on Chirrut. So for example, if you deploy Chirrut and your opponent ambushes him immediately, they play some big ambush unit with energy conversion lab or just a normal unit with ambush that hits hard, um, and they do 5 damage. He's not defeated. Um, he would be defeated at the end of the regroup phase, but the same synergies that I was just discussing with healing and other buffs work really well with him because, let's say they put 5 damage on him and then you heal him and he survives. And they're like, oh, shoot, I didn't get him this round. And then next round, they put more damage on him. And once again, he's not defeated until the end of the phase. Once again, you end up buffing him or healing him or something, and he survives. So one card that works really well with Chirrut is Protector, which is fitting because it shows him on the art. This is a 1 cost double blue upgrade that gives an attached unit Sentinel and +1/+1. So if you play this on Chirrut, he gains Sentinel. And with Sentinel, and the fact that he isn't defeated by having no remaining HP, he can actually defend against an infinite number of normal unit attacks. They could deal 200 damage to him and he's still not defeated. He's just standing there blocking all the opponent's attacks and holding off the opponent's attempts to deal with your base completely for the turn. Now, that isn't to say that he cannot be removed by anything. There's one big weakness that we really have to highlight, and that is the card Takedown. Defeat a unit with 5 or less remaining HP. Chirrut has 5 HP. Um, Takedown does not defeat someone by making them have no remaining HP. It just defeats them conditionally. So it will actually be able to defeat him as soon as he is played. This is probably his main weakness. Specifically, the card Takedown is something that's very dangerous for him. There are a few other effect cards that have similar effects in the Vigilance aspect. So cards like Vigilance itself or Count Dooku have similar versions of the effect, but they are at a lower HP threshold. Whereas Takedown can defeat him as soon as he deploys. And it could be a big problem. If you're playing Chirrut against a blue deck, you might have to be thinking about how to counter a potential takedown. So one example is you could wait to deploy Chirrut until your opponent does not have 4 resources available for the takedown. Another thing that you could do is you could play the Regional Governor. So Regional Governor, when played, name a card. Well, this unit is in play. Opponents can't play the named card. I have used her to prevent the opponent from playing Takedown when I was playing Iden Versio, who has a similar problem. So Iden, when she deploys, she has a shield, but she only has 4 HP. So the shield keeps her alive against a lot of things, but the opponent can play Takedown and defeat her through the shield immediately. I've had a game where it was time to deploy Iden. My opponent was holding resources. I was like, this could be a takedown. I play my Regional Governor, name Takedown. Opponent can no longer defeat my Iden. I play Iden and end up getting some value. So sure, it can do a similar thing. Regional Governor is in aspect for him. Another card that I want to highlight with Chirrut is it binds all things. So this is a card that I think has amazing synergy with him. 2 cost event, heal up to 3 damage from a unit. If you control a force unit, you may deal that much damage to another unit. So this card is really strong in the right situation, but has had some difficulty with being situational because how often are you going to have a damaged unit, and how often are you going to have a damaged unit and a force unit? Well, Chirrut solves both of those problems for you because first off, he can have a ton of damage on him and still be on the board. Second off, he's a force unit. So if you deploy him, they swing in and hit him for 5, he's still on the board. Now you play It Binds All Things, remove 3 damage, take out one of their units, and Chirrut is now not going to be defeated at the end of the end of the action phase. So very strong synergy there. And synergizes with upgrades, synergizes with other things that are either going to heal him or are going to he synergizes well with things that are either going to heal him or buff his HP to get him out of range of damage that would otherwise be lethal at the end of the turn. Now, is that enough to make Chirrut a good leader? Honestly, I don't know. I haven't played with him yet. They just previewed him today. It could end up being that those synergies aren't good enough and he's just not really that strong. But it could also be that they end up being really solid and kind of enable a new style of play. I personally am quite excited to build a Chirrut deck and test him out, see whether or not the combinations work well. I'm a big fan of the character from the film, and so I'm excited to see how he does in the game as well. And they have a very, I think they have a very characterful ability there as well. You just sort of think of Chirrut walking out into certain death to activate that transmission. All the guys shooting at him. Everybody knows he has no chance, but he manages to use the force or bend things around him or whatever it is exactly that he did to stay alive long enough to complete the mission. And similarly, your opponent's going to find him pretty hard to remove in this game, at least until he does one last thing. Okay, so that's going to do it for these cards, guys. Thanks to y'all for watching. Please let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree, have other thoughts about these cards, have some synergies that I missed, evaluations that you think should be added. Yeah, I'm happy to hear feedback, and that's going to do it for this one. Otherwise, guys, thanks to y'all for watching, and we will be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.